land, this space where we are meeting this evening. The Menang people have been here on this Lunga Budja for thousands of years. The connection they shared with this place we call the Great Southern runs generations deep. It is with respect that I acknowledge the Menang people and their elders past, present and emerging. It's a privilege to be here, to live here, to learn here and to be here together this evening, so thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. Lyn, so you can see me, but what you can't see is this lovely audience that we've got. We've got a huge crowd, so hopefully you heard them before.
That's wonderful.
And with the setup of this, I'd make eye contact with you if I could, but actually I'm looking at you on the screen, so I hope that's not too distracting for you.
Okay.
So, and just to the people who are joining us on the live stream, thank you so much for joining us. And just disclaimer, there will be some spoilers because we are here with Lyn. We want to get to the guts of this book. We want to talk about everything, so there will be some spoilers. All right. Okay, Lyn, thank you so much for being here. Gosh, so what a journey this book has been for you. This is your debut novel.
Yeah, correct.
And this took out quite a few awards, right? So this, let's see, 2021, what is the ARA? What's that?
Oh, goodness, Billie-Jo, it's the Australian, I don't know off the top of my head, isn't it awful?
I bet it's extremely prestigious. Historical Novel Prize for Adult Fiction, so you were longlisted for that one.
Yeah.
You were a finalist in this year's UK People's Book Prize, and also this year you won the Indie Book Award for debut fiction.
Yes, which was seriously astounding and totally unexpected, as they all have been. I mean, you never really do think, oh, I don't know, maybe some people do, but you never really do think you're going to, anything like that is going to happen. Each little thing that you achieve along the way, like for me, it was an agent, and then a book deal, and it was a 2-book deal, and then having royalties in advance, and then all of the little milestones along the way. Each one, for me at any rate, continues to be. So to win awards is something that, yeah, totally not in my.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say they weren't enough to retire.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Give up my day job.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful and incredibly complimentary affirmation that, especially for an organisation, a publishing house like Penguin,
Yeah.
to
Okay.
say, we want this book. We also want the next book. So getting a 2-book deal is really, that just totally blew me away. And then to say, and we're going to give you some money to kind of demonstrate our faith in you. So that was all of those things have been, kind of little mini shocks along the way, but just really wonderful. So it has really been an amazing journey for me. And, I'm no spring chicken, so I'm 63, so I was 62. That's right, yeah, 62 when the book came out. And so, no, I haven't kind of got a 30-year writing career ahead of me. Or maybe I have. Touch wood, maybe I have. But I was really conscious of the fact that I don't have, 30 or 40 years ahead of me. Like, I've got a couple of writer friends who are, in their 30s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
And those men who are in their 30s and 40s, I think, you've done really well to set yourself up and to give yourself a long career in as being a novelist. So, so at 62 it's a little bit different.
Because for a long time you have worked in and I was watching another interview that you were in, and you referred to it as grey literature.
Yeah.
So you've had quite a long career in grey literature, and then you've also done teaching. You've taught creative writing classes and things as well, haven't you?
Yeah, and I taught, my very first career was as I'll say English teacher, but I taught a few other subjects as well, like legal studies and history. And And I did that for a few years, and then I left. I really enjoyed it, but I don't know, I kind of felt there was something else I wanted to do, and writing was definitely one of those things. And I left and I became what's called a technical writer. So I was writing manuals for software. And so this is back in the 80s, and we would get manuals that were this thick to tell you.
Oh, my God. Yeah, who remembers that? Jane? Oh, my God. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was one of the people writing those manuals, and I really enjoyed it. And then I did that for a couple of years, and then I actually left the company that I was working for doing that and started my own business because I really enjoyed that, but I also wanted to write other kinds of things like reports and I don't know, and over the years I've written honestly anything that you can think of that a company needs, from strategic plans to I don't know, policies and reports and video scripts and I don't know.
Artists, wasn't it something?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work with some artists as well, like fashion designers and photographers and visual artists.
So writing taglines and snippets and things for them?
Yeah, all sorts of little things like that. So even sometimes coming up with the title of their work or collaborating with them to name their work, and then writing little captions that go when you go to an art gallery and you see the description of the work and what they're trying to convey through the work. So I've done a little bit of that too, which is really fun and not so grey maybe as things like policy.
What exactly is grey literature? That's the computer manual stuff that you were doing before?
And the sort of corporate work, which would be things like policies and procedures, strategic papers, annual reports, all of those kinds of things. Even website content. I don't know. There's awards for entries in business awards.
Yeah. Okay.
And applications for funding, and all. There's a whole range of things, and it's kept me very well occupied. Yeah. So. Yeah. But very different to writing novels.
Yeah, incredibly. Yeah. Do you feel like you bring these skills from grey literature? Do you feel like that comes into or supports your novel writing?
Yeah. Look, I think more than I realised that it would, and I think it helped me understand that sometimes you write something and then you rewrite it and you rewrite it and you rewrite it and you rewrite it, and that very rigorous editing process is what takes something from being okay to being really, really good, or achieving the goal that you set out to achieve. And I think also there was one point when I was restructuring the novel, and those of you who've read it know it's kind of got lots of timelines, and it's got
lots happening.
View and everything kind of, I've tried to interlock everything very, very carefully. And I will say there was a time where I thought, I don't know if I can pull this off. I felt like I had this big ball of wool that was just really knotted, and I didn't know how I was going to untangle it. And I remember one day thinking, I don't know if I can do this. And I thought, look, I do this all the time for my clients who give me knotted balls of wool. It's complex and it's badly structured and it's badly written and, or in need of a lot of work. And I just sit there and I do it, and I just sort of chip away at it. And every time I do something, it makes it a little bit better and I get a little bit closer. And so I just adopted the same attitude. I thought, it's okay. I just keep chipping away at it. I just keep making it better. I just keep working on it and working on it and working on it. So I think that was the biggest advantage of having done all those, decades of grey literature, and having, worked on things for clients. And I kind of also thought one day, all right, I do this for clients all the time, and I never let anything go back to them until it's, or go to press or go out to clients or whatever it might be, until, it's really, really good and highly polished. And I just thought, I just have to adopt the same thing. If I do it for clients, I can do it for me, and this is really important for me. So
this gave you grey lit experiences, gave you discipline and strategy to apply.
Awesome. Yeah, and definitely that idea of I'm just going to just keep editing it. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect.
Yeah.
Now I can just, and I'm not saying it ever gets perfect quite, but I can keep working at it. I can keep working at it. I can keep working at it. And I guess I know, if there's one thing I can do, it's take a sentence and make it better.
Yeah.
Sort of
Okay. Yeah.
play around with the structure and the words and the punctuation and
so no
the
fear
whole
of editing.
thing.
No fear of editing, then just.
No fear of editing. No.
Yeah.
And I have to say also, Penguin were absolutely amazing, and I had kind of two editors. I have what's called my publisher, which is Bev, and she and I worked on, after we had signed the contract, she and I worked on sort of big picture stuff, and we changed some of the really big picture stuff.
Right.
And she's absolutely amazing. And then I started working with Catherine, who was my editor, and she was absolutely amazing too. And both Bev and I and Catherine and I really clicked, and we could have these incredible conversations about, I think the comma should go here because what we're trying to say or what we're trying to emphasise here, or
okay.
I think we need to break this up into two sentences to increase the impact, and some of these things are really hard to talk about, but there are things like rhythms to sentences, and we used to talk about that kind of thing too. So we had these really incredible conversations, and I know a couple of writers who say they don't like the editing process, but it's really painful for them, perhaps to keep reworking and for someone to be saying, this isn't quite good enough, or this character doesn't quite work for me, or the chronology isn't quite right, we need to change things, because it does mean a lot of work. But yeah, I just absolutely loved it, and Bev and Catherine were just sensational, and it was just, we edited for about a year.
Oh,
so long process.
Yeah, that's huge. Is that longer than normal? I will get back to you, Patty. Yep.
It's relevant to us.
Okay. Patty's just going to ask a question in a moment.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yes, go for it, Patty.
I just want to know, how do you ever get to a point where you think, I really have overworked this, I need to slow down?
Were you able to hear that, Lyn?
I think so. Could you just repeat it, Billie-Jo?
So that's my Nana, by the way. Nana Patty was just asking. She was just asking, do you ever get to a point where you feel like you've overworked something? Was that right? Yeah.
I don't think I did. Because, look, even now, sometimes I read or I hear little bits of the novel, and I think, I should have changed that sentence. I should have done that. So I don't think so. One day when I was editing, I was talking to a friend on the phone, and I was explaining to her how the in-depth editing that we were doing and how long it was going to take before it was going to go to print. And I was pretty dedicated. I was kind of lucky it was in 2020 when we were in Melbourne. We were all in lockdown, for most of that year. And look, the whole thing was awful, of course, but for writers and for me going through that editing process, it meant I had a lot of time to do it. And I've lost my train of thought. I really enjoyed it, and I just wanted to keep working on it. And this friend said to me, do you think you're overdoing it? Do you think you're editing it too much? And I said, if I read a sentence and I don't think it works well, I can't just say, that'll be all right, it's okay, I'll just keep reading. I said I kind of feel like if I can see that it can be improved, I want to improve it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Can I ask you, Nan, does she think that I overworked too many?
Yeah. So, Lyn...
No, not at all. But it's such a complex plot, and there's such a lot of entanglement in it.
That's what I was going for.
Yeah, no, she agrees with you. Like, there's always, you can still be working things, and
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Otherwise you never print it.
Yes, that's true. Did you hear
What
that?
was that?
She said you've got to stop somewhere, otherwise you'd never print it.
Yeah, and so what makes, I think, most writers stop, and I was talking to someone else, a friend, about this the other day, and we said it's always budgets and deadlines. You just, someone runs out of money.
Right. Yeah.
Or you've got it scheduled, so it's got to go to the printer this day, so it's going to be in book. So all of this is scheduled well in advance. So like we already have approximate, publication date for the next novel, but it won't be until 2024. So, things are planned a long way ahead. So I think, again, especially in big publishing houses like Penguin, because they publish so many.
And you're a good planner, are you? Clearly you're a good planner. Because if I was given until 2024 to get something out, I reckon I'd go, that's all right. I'll take a bit of time, or I would need the publishing house to drip feed me reminders, monthly reminders. Billy, get more words done. Billy, are you up to this bit?
Yeah. Look, procrastination is the, biggest demon for writers, and I'm certainly guilty of that. But look, this is all I've wanted to do all my life, really, and I think that I'm so lucky and privileged in many ways to have this opportunity, and because I'm in my 60s, if I don't, I've got to keep them coming.
Yeah.
And certainly my time doing all the not so much doing the grey literature, but running my own business meant that, and so I've worked from home for 30 years, pretty much all of the time. And awesome. People used to say, I don't know how you do it. I'd just be kicking around, watching telly and putting another load in the washing machine and cooking dinner and all the rest of it. And I said, yeah, but if I don't work, I don't get any money.
Yeah.
So there's a very direct correlation because I charge an hourly rate. So if I work 10 hours, I get paid for 10 hours. If I work for 1 hour, I get paid for 1 hour. So it's a big incentive to, put that time in. And I think that all of those years of doing that has given me some discipline to sit at the desk, sort of bum on seat, head down, fingers on the keyboard, and even if what comes out isn't so good, I know I can go back and edit it. So I don't know. Time will tell. Maybe I won't get it. Maybe I won't get it done in time.
What did that feel like when you got this? So Penguin Random House have said yes, Lyn, we want to push forward with this. We love it. We look forward to a year of editing, and then you sign the contract and it's a 2-book deal. Does that feel like pressure, or do you already have ideas in the back of your head and
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I had a few ideas, or have a few ideas, and before we finished The Silent Listener, Bev, my publisher at Penguin, and I were talking about what was going to come next, and I sent her about 3 or 4 ideas, and actually I'll tell you a different story. I had an idea for a book, and I'm in a couple of writing groups, and I wrote a chapter of this book and gave it to everyone in the writing groups, and they all said, oh, my God, this is amazing, this is incredible. And so I sent this chapter to Bev at Penguin, and she wrote back and she said, this is amazing, this is incredible, but it can't be book number 2 because in your contract it says your book number 2 is going to be, and I quote, another compelling literary psychological thriller. The book that I had planned was not. So I thought I had to go back and I didn't take any notice of that when I signed the contract.
Yeah, right. You can't add a body or something to the...
Yeah, dead body in the garden. Yeah. So I had to stop and think, and I had I came up with 2 or 3 ideas, and just sent like a paragraph of each one and maybe a working title. And Bev came back and said, that one, do that one. So actually what she said is, give us more information about that one. Yeah. And I thought, I don't know. This is as much as I've come up with. So I sat and thought about it, and I sort of came up with about, 200 or 300 words and sent that to her. And she said, this is fantastic, go for it.
Is there some safety in that, knowing that you're pitching them a small amount and knowing that the process is in front of you? So, like, you know that what you present and whatever you use as, bait to hook them, you can rework things?
Yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And as I'm writing, a lot of things are changing, and I'm going off to see Penguin in the middle of July, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm just going to have to say, so this isn't like this anymore. It's now like, but they'll be fine with it. The basic premise of the story is the same, and the basic, I guess I'm going to say deception is sort of, the basic deceptions are still in place too. So I think they'll be all right about it.
Yeah. So Lyn, you mentioned before that this is what you've always wanted to do. So does that mean that you loved reading? Like, have you always loved reading and words? And I imagine so. After reading this book, like, the whole dictionary aspect that was in there and the synesthesia with the words, like, it was pretty clear that you love language.
I do.
So tell us a bit about what kind of books you like to read.
Okay. I probably tend to read, what we'd call literary fiction, so less plot-driven, more character-based, and a lot of, internal exploration of, the human condition, all of that kind of stuff.
So like Amanda Laurie's The Labyrinth, that kind of thing?
Yes. Yeah, very good example, yeah, and there's heaps of them around.
Yeah.
But certainly since I've been writing this book, because I did set out to write a very, I'm going to say, kind of highbrow literary fiction piece that, would win the Stella Prize, of course. And but it didn't turn out that way, of course. And once I realised that, I thought, I think this is going to kind of turn into a bit of a crimey thriller book. And I really enjoyed doing that. And then I started reading some more crime and thriller. And as a kid, as a teenager, I'd always liked, spy novels, Le Carre and Agatha Christie, that kind of thing. And I thought there's a lot of kind of fun in reading and writing those kinds of books. It doesn't, and I think, readers really enjoy them. So I thought, I think I'm going to do this. And look, I know there's a lot of bleak material in The Silent Listener, but hopefully there's a bit of, kind of dark comedy and a bit of light relief, and certainly the Joy's love of language and her synesthesia with words and so on. I really wanted to, convey my love of language and love of reading. And then, so I sort of, and I like classics as well, so I kind of try to read something relatively new that's come out recently, and then a classic or something that, maybe came out 10 or 20 years ago, that stood the test of time. So I sort of alternate a little bit between those kinds of things. And occasionally I read non-fiction, mainly, I guess, sort of, I'm going to say sociology and psychology, that kind of thing. I like kind of reading about how and why people think and behave the way they do.
Yeah. A bit of Alan de Botton, maybe?
Yeah. And for those of us feeling down around about the state of the world at the moment, there's a fantastic book which I've read called Humankind by a Dutch historian.
Oh, I know the one. Is that Rutger
Bregman?
Yeah.
Absolutely terrific. And another one of his which came out.
Utopia. Did he write Utopia?
Utopia for Realists.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
super brilliant.
It's really good book. Yeah. I lent my copy to someone, and then he bloody went back to France. So I don't have that book anymore. So I need to get another one. Yeah.
Oh, they're really good. So I kind of like reading those sorts of things as well. But definitely, a mix of crime, a mix of literary fiction, a mix of...
Yeah. So, do you have any like rituals or habits around your writing practice?
Procrastinating.
Yeah. See, I knew we were kindred spirits. Really. Yeah.
Yeah, I touched on it before. It is sometimes hard to sit and write. And I can do it with the grey literature seriously for hours at a time. With my own writing, you know, look, I'm proud of what I did with The Silent Listener, but, you know, a lot of writers are plagued by self-doubt, and I'm certainly one of them.
Does that mean that you have a high standard for yourself or an expectation for yourself then? Is that not a good thing?
I guess so, yeah. And, you know, sometimes I'll write a sentence or a scene and think, oh, that's just awful. Or I'll reread it. You know, I might write it today, or I wrote it 3 weeks ago, and then I'm back in that scene today and I read it and I think, what was I thinking? But one of the things that I have realised, and I've done some mentoring and manuscript assessments and things like that for other writers, is this idea of understanding that there are two aspects. I mean, there's lots of aspects of writing, but in the context of what we're talking about now, there are two aspects, and one is that you need to work out what you're going to write, and then you need to work out how you're going to write it. And I think that works at the level of, like, you know, the whole novel, right down to, you know, a scene or a sentence or a character, and the structure of your novel and the voices and the language that your character's going to use and all of that kind of thing. And sometimes I write sentences and when I go back and think, oh, that is really bad, I remind myself that that was at the point that I wrote it, I was in the process of working out what to write. Now I can think about how I'm going to write that. So it has, you know, maximum impact, maybe some lyricism, or, you know, and the rhythm of the sentence is right, or, you know, consistent voice, or, you know, all these things that we think about. But getting back to the question about rituals, I don't have a really solid daily ritual because I'm still working in my day job. So I have to kind of keep my clients happy and juggle that, and then juggle my writing. So sometimes I'll do my day job in the morning and try and write in the afternoon and evening, but sometimes it can be the other way around. Some days I can have too much work, so I don't get to do any creative writing at all. So it varies a lot, and I wish that it didn't, but it does for me, and it does for other writers too, I know. So I think you've kind of got to learn to trust the process and trust yourself, that you just keep chipping away, and a lot of, weirdly, I think a lot of writing happens when you're not at the desk, when you suddenly, like I was talking to a couple of friends yesterday about writing, and one of them, I don't know whether you've read any of J.P. Pomare's books, Call Me Evie, In the Clearing.
No, I haven't. What was that? J.P.
Pomare.
J.P. Pomare. We need to remember that. Lucky? We need to remember that.
Okay. Josh and I are friends, and he and I and another writer were talking yesterday, and he, I forget where I was going with that. What were we talking about, the rituals?
Oh, I'm sorry. I cut you off, and I'm...
No, that's all right. That's all right.
So I don't remember where you were up to either.
Yeah, no, I don't know that, but I can't remember. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I'll segue and say Josh is one of these people who, he's 30 years younger than me. He had his 30th birthday party the same year I had my 60th, and and we're friends because we're in a writing group together, and then we've become really good friends. And he inspired me because when we met, when we joined or accepted into a novel writing masterclass, and the first day that the first one we both went to was where we met, and Josh was further along in his book than I was, and that was all terrific. And then suddenly he had a 2-book deal. He'd had a bidding war with publishers.
Ooh, that must be nice.
The Dream, he had huge royalties in advance. He quit his day job, started writing full time. His second book came out. That's just been signed with Disney, and it was signed a while ago, but filming has just started.
Oh, wow.
They're going to make film. Disney is making a film of his second book. He's had 2 others out. Another one's coming out in a few months. He's really, he's very inspiring and kind of
rolling ahead. That's awesome.
Yeah, rolling ahead. Really dedicated and professional, professional attitude to his writing. So I kind of look at him and think, right, if he can do it, I can do it. Let's keep going. I
just remembered what you were talking about before,
yeah.
And it's because it made me think of Nana Paddy. She's always said to me, you were talking about how you are actually always writing, and Nana Paddy's always said that to me as well, like doing assignments and things. She's always said, when you're doing the dishes, you're actually, when you're in the garden, when you're doing all sorts of different things, you are still doing your work, even if you're not physically at the desk.
Yeah. So when we were talking yesterday, that's right. Thank you. He was talking about a little thing in his next book and explaining it to us. And in this next book that I'm writing, I've had this big thing that I have not been able to work out how I'm going to get these 2 characters, not geographically from point A to point B, but sort of, I don't know, in their heads from point A to point B, sort of how they're going to get from here to here. And we were just talking, and Josh said something about, and this idea just popped into my mind, and I thought, oh my God, that's just so obvious. Of course that's what they're going to do. One of them is going to say this, and then it's going to happen, and I need another character, but that's okay, and off I go. And I thought, we were just having coffee in a yak, the 3 of us, and I just thought, oh wow, I have actually, I don't know, somewhere in the back of my head, in my subconscious, I'm constantly, I'm constantly trying to solve this problem, and it just came to me. So that's, maybe if I'd sat at the desk and tried to make it happen, it wouldn't have.
Yeah. So before we move on to unpacking this book, just in the acknowledgements at the back of the book, you mentioned that you spent a month in Mexico writing. Can you tell us a bit about what that was like?
That was unbelievable. So I did a master's in creative writing at Melbourne Uni a few years ago, and there was a woman there from Mexico, and we became friends. She had come over to do the master's in creative writing, and we became friends, and I was writing this novel. She went back to Mexico after she finished her master's, and we were friends, so we were emailing, and then my kids decided that they were going to go to America and said to me, why don't you come to New York for Christmas, meet us in New York for Christmas, and and I said, that's pretty amazing. And then I thought, okay, if I'm going to go to America, I'm going to go to Mexico. So because Marina kept saying to me, come to Mexico, write your novel in Mexico. I've got a spare room. You can just sit there and write. So I did. And so I was there for a month in her spare room. And when I got there, she had it set up with a desk and a whole lot of beautiful stationery and things like sharpened pencils, a teapot and a whole lot of tea and a cup and a window that looked out onto this street. And, I'd never been to Mexico, and it just blew me away because the art and the music there is just phenomenal. So I was in Mexico City in a very kind of sort of artsy area, quite sort of perhaps slightly, not exactly privileged, but sort of bohemian area. Yeah. And every day I wrote for at least half a day because I usually spent about half a day doing sightseeing and going to the they call their art galleries museums. Yeah. So going to museums and art galleries and other things, and sometimes with Marina, sometimes by myself. I had gone off and taken Spanish lessons before I went, so I could speak, 3 words in Spanish. And it was just wonderful. And sometimes I'd be sitting in my room working writing, and there would just be bands walking down the street playing, just musicians playing in the street. And
did you get drawn into that? Did that pull you up out of your chair, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You have to go and look at them. These fairly handsome Mexican men playing saxophone and whatever. Yeah, you're going to go and have a look.
Yeah.
But it was really terrific, and I wrote thousands of words in Mexico, and it was just inspiring. And Marina is a writer as well, so we'd often talk about writing, and she had a whole lot of books that I'd never even heard of from a lot of American writers. So I read a lot as well, and it was a dream come true. Just absolutely beautiful.
Do you think like if you had have had that same month off of work, because I'm assuming that you had a month off of work, you weren't working at the same time. So if you had been at home, in your home, and had that same month off, do you think you got more done there?
Yeah, I definitely got more done.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you kind of know that's your job, sit here and do it.
Yeah.
Similarly, I was awarded a fellowship to go to Varuna, which is a writer's house in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. So I had a fortnight there, and that is an absolutely amazing place because they provide all the food that you could possibly want for breakfast and lunch, and you just come down and make your breakfast and lunch when you want to. And then they have a cook who comes in to make your evening meal.
Ooh, that's awesome.
And, it's just divine. And there's about 5 or 6 people in the house at any one time, all writers. And so you sit around the dining room table at 6 o'clock or whatever it is, and Sheila serves you the evening meal and explains what she's going to cook, and then we have a little conversation about what we're going to have for dinner tomorrow night, just make sure that we're all, okay with whatever she's got on the menu. And it's the same thing. You can achieve incredible amount of work because, you don't have kids, you don't have washing to put on, no shopping, no cooking, no cleaning up, although at night time, well, you kind of do. You clean up your own dishes, and at night time, after dinner, we wash dishes together and put them away. But it's just this absence of the normal day-to-day chores and tasks and distractions, and you achieve an awful lot. It's really amazing. Mm.
Now, getting to the silent listener, and can you see here? I went a bit crazy with the tabs. I don't know if you can see that. It's got this beautiful little fringe now. It's like a flapper dress kind of thing. But the way you work with words, I had to stop. I had to be like, I've annotated all through the margins, and there was a lot there to try and, on one hand, just to be keeping track of things and be connecting things, but also just the way, just your prose. It was beautiful. So.
Oh wow! Thank you.
Which was a credit to you as a writer, considering you're writing about such intense subject matter, but also it became such an experience for the reader to be going on such a harrowing journey, but to be kind of carried along with the prose. That it really helped. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really lovely. It's really nice to hear all of that.
With because this story is loosely based on your own childhood experiences in rural Victoria.
Yeah.
So the fact that this is auto-fiction, did that make the writing process easier or harder?
I'm going to say easier because so the farm that, as described in the novel, is the farm that I grew up on.
Yeah.
So we weren't quite as remote as I've placed it in the novel, but it was a dairy farm. The dam was there with the water lilies. The rubbish tank was there. We used to throw rubbish and burn it in the tank in the front paddock closest to the house. My mum was a florist, so we have this amazing garden, but she actually had she did work from a little back room for a few years, and then she went into a shop in the sort of biggish town near us.
Yeah.
And so it meant that, and the house is essentially the house as I described it. So it meant that all of the setting was just sitting there waiting for me.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to imagine that into existence. And it also meant that, you know, I didn't sort of have to keep track of now where have I put the dam and where have I put the tank and the house and the bedroom and things like that. And I heard Tim Winton once say that when he uses houses in his novels, he picks a house that he knows, like a friend's house or grandparents' house or whatever it is, and that's it, and that's the layout of the house. So he knows he's always correct. So all of that was there. The wall hanging was hanging over the kitchen table as described. All of that made it easy to create the setting and to create the atmosphere. My dad is pretty much the father in The Silent Listener. I will say that there are some aspects of his personality and behaviour that are exaggerated, but there are some that are actually downplayed. So one day in one of the writing groups that I'm in, I wrote a chapter which didn't actually make it to the novel in the end, but I wrote a chapter that was based on something that happened to me and one of my brothers. And I pretty much made up all of it except for the last little bit. And it wasn't brutal, but it was quite unusual, I guess, I'm going to say, but true and sad. And when everyone in the writing group, when they were giving me feedback about it, they were telling me how much they really enjoyed it and the writing was really powerful and all the rest of it. And then someone said, except for the last 2 or 3 paragraphs where you describe this happening, because really that would never happen. That would never, ever happen. No one would ever do that.
Right.
And everyone agreed that would never happen. No one would ever do that. And I said, that's really interesting because all of the chapter is made up except for those last 3 paragraphs, and that is true. And they felt that if I left it in the book, no one would believe it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's this mixture of, here's my real life dad. Here's 80% of what you get in the novel is true. The other 20% is a mixture of, okay, some things I've exaggerated and some things I've actually made, I'm going to say, I don't know, calmer or smoother or
something or
So it did mean, so the setting was there kind of waiting for me, and in a sense so were all of the characters. Although, you know, some of them are made up, like the Felicities are made up. And probably the Felicity and a few other characters. Oh, and Wendy Boscombe's made up. Oh, maybe I should make that very. There was no Wendy Boscombe in my life who went missing, and no, that's all fiction. Thank goodness. One of the stories that's real is the story of the next door neighbours, the man who married his...
Mr. Larson?
Yeah, Mr. Larson's story is true. We did have a neighbour who married the sister of the woman he loved. Wow. He was a fair bit older than my parents, so I think he was kind of courting in the 20s.
And was it that simple a mix-up as well, that the father and future father-in-law just wrote the wrong name? Oh,
but he did it deliberately.
Oh, did he?
He did it deliberately. The woman who my next door neighbour married was older and she was mean and awful.
Was he trying to palm her off?
Yes.
Oh, far out.
Yeah. The oldest daughter had to get married first.
Right.
So we're talking 1920s. So he he fell in love with Beryl. Obviously, all the names are different.
Yeah.
Married Barbara.
Boyle, is that right? Beryl Boyle.
Yeah, completely made up name. And then he did come down to our house on Saturday afternoons and make these phone calls to Beryl. And we all knew And my father knew as well, and I don't know how or why, but my father condoned it, even though it was totally, obviously, sinful. And it is true also, but I shifted the chronology. Many years later, well after I'd left home, my dad told me that the family was leaving the district.
Yeah.
And then he said, well, actually what's happening is they're separating because Mr. Larson is dying. And so he went to live with Beryl for the last few years of his life and died with Beryl. So it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
But lovely that they ended up together.
So was that an act of, like, compassion on George's part?
I guess so. Yep.
An exception to the rule in that instance? Like.
Yeah, although, see, the whole thing was that my father / George, in a sense, it wasn't that he didn't mind if other people were sinners or did the wrong thing, but I don't think he ever felt responsible for other people's sins, where he did feel totally responsible for us. And, with the hindsight of, 63 years of life, etc., I think that what he wanted was for us to go to heaven. And for him that meant we had to go to church, we had to pray, we had to be all of these things.
Yeah.
We had to know the Bible, we had to, all of this stuff. And he wanted to control that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I've got it in the book, that he did honestly tell us that he would be the only unhappy person in heaven because his children would be in hell.
Yeah, that's definitely in the book, yeah.
Yeah, and that was that's a big thing to have hanging over you as a child.
Yeah, that's massive responsibility and responsibility for how your father's feeling and to meet that expectation, and that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, so I think it was this, he wanted to control us. He didn't feel so much the need to control other people in the community.
Yep. Yeah. And I suppose, is the his family unit is a reflection of him then as well, and his part.
Absolutely. Yes. He did not like us, but we never did, but he did not like us misbehaving in public or, being anything than perfectly well behaved. Yeah.
So when did you feel like this is kind of two parts, when did you feel like you should write this story? And then when did you feel like you could write this story?
Could is very easy to answer. It was after Dad died.
Yes, yeah.
And I did a lot of writing while my mum was still alive, but the book came out after she died. And I don't think she would have dealt with it very easily.
Yeah.
And then in terms of I think I felt that I should write this novel, I'm going to say probably from about the time I had my children.
Okay, right.
I think that was a big thing for me, as it is for everyone. You have your first child and your perspective changes, and you do have this rush of love, obviously, first and foremost, but then, there is this sort of responsibility that you're holding this, incredibly vulnerable, totally dependent human in your arms and in your life. So I think I started to do a lot more reflection of what my childhood had been and what it perhaps could have been and what I wanted for my children. And I started to think, I think I need to write about this, if only to get it out of my head and out of my heart and to perhaps deal with it a little bit.
Yeah.
Good question.
Oh, there was just a question. Did it work? Did it work for you? Yeah?
Yeah. And I'm going to say I think that one of the reasons it worked was because I turned it into fiction. So I know that you had possibly been going to ask me what was the last book that I read, and last night, I don't know if you can read this.
Oh, yeah. That's in my pile at work, actually. Yeah.
So Janine Makosa, who wrote this, is in my writing group, so I'd read sections of it before it came out.
This is a memoir. Yeah, a memoir. Oh, it says down the bottom, a memoir.
Yeah, a memoir. Yeah. So Janine had a very similar childhood to me, and she has chosen to write it in this very unusual style as a memoir. So I literally did finish reading that last night. But so we've talked about the fact that we've approached a very similar topic, or very similar childhood, and in extremely different ways. So Janine has gone down this path of writing a very brave memoir. I started writing little vignettes of episodes that happened to me, and then I quickly started writing fiction, fictional episodes and fictional scenes, and decided that I couldn't write I all the time, and so I came up with the name Joy for the main character. And once I started, because at first I was writing them all in first person, I did this happened to me, and then I thought, no, I need to distance myself from all of this, named the character Joy, and then started creating a lot more fiction. And the creation of the fiction, I think, gave me distance and I'm going to say some safety, because it meant that I could make up things, and also that I could avoid anything that I wanted to if I thought that's just too awful, or I can't write about that, or that's more about my brothers than me. I can leave out, I can be a lot more in control of what goes in and what goes out. Whereas I think if you write a memoir, you kind of go down a path where, you're not obviously not going to put everything in, but you kind of, I think, have a responsibility to write the truth, at least as you see it, or remember it, or whatever. But I chose fiction, and I think I had a lot more fun.
So I was watching another interview on YouTube that you'd done, and you mentioned that a student, when you were on a panel, a student had asked you, why it was that you, with all of your experience in grey literature and things, why you didn't just write essays about domestic violence and things like that, if that's what you wanted to discuss, and then why was it that you went into fiction? And I thought your answer was really, really interesting. Could you elaborate on that, why it was that you chose to?
Hopefully I'm going to give the same answer, Jo. I think I decided to write fiction because it would have a wider audience. So not many people really read essays or articles, and I think also that by writing fiction, I could hopefully almost give readers a vicarious experience of being Joy, or of being like experiencing her fear and her trepidation and her dread and so on. And I guess if there's one thing I kind of wanted is for people to realise that trauma in childhood has long-term ramifications, and I never hit my children, and I'm a big proponent that you should never hit children for any reason, and because it's not just in the moment, it's not just when the child gets the smack. Maybe for the person, maybe administering the smack, maybe it's a moment and then they've forgotten about it, or it's not been traumatising for them. But I think for children to have someone who loves them and is charged with nurturing, protecting and helping them move from being this totally independent baby to a functioning, dependent, respectful adult, those moments when they're smacked and hit and scared and traumatised and psychologically abused and so on stay with you, and the trauma lasts forever.
Absolutely. And also, just cognitively, like they do not have the skills to be able to rationalise or process what has just happened. So perhaps the adult can lose control of emotions or lash out, or something can occur, and they can have a grasp on what's going around them and how they feel about it, and they can process it. But the child necessarily doesn't have the skills developed to be able to do that.
No, that's right. And I've thought a lot too about the sexual abuse charges you know, within the Catholic Church and other churches and other institutions, of course, and that, you know, a lot of people said, well, if this happened, why didn't you say anything at the time, and why have you taken 25 years or more to speak up about it? Did you even tell your friends? Did you tell your parents, etc.? But I think there are a couple of things going on there. One, children don't know necessarily what the right thing to do is, and we know that they're often kind of bullied or coerced or frightened into staying quiet, and often not believed. And also, I think you are drowning in shame. Yeah. It's very difficult to talk about what someone else has done to you, even if you can process it and say, well, I know it wasn't me at fault, it was that person and they should not have done that. It's not something, you know, you're going to go to school and talk about with your friends, or, you know, even like rape survivors and so on. It's not something you're going to come out and talk about. Even if you know you're not in the wrong, you drown in shame, and it takes a long time to get to a point where you can talk to someone about what happened. So children are just in the most, you know, vulnerable situations. So, so I didn't want to write articles and have an intellectual discussion about this. I wanted readers to experience it.
Yeah, yep. You know, just going off what we were just talking about, I think too there's, you know, because one of the deep frustrations of this book is that as it unfolds, you realise, and we are reminded repeatedly, that people knew what was happening to Joy and her family. People knew what was happening to Gwen, and no one intervened. And that's, you know, is that a reflection of society at the time? Is that you know, so I mean, it wasn't until the 80s really, like it took a while across the different states to get legislated, but really it was in the 80s that we saw domestic violence being, it was a criminal offence, you know, so, and it was like, I think it was 1997 that WA was like, and financial abuse, that's no good too, you know, so then that was recognised, and slowly but surely these sorts of different, and now it's like a class of domestic abuse under an act, but like that's a long time, and well, that's not long ago enough. And then when the context of your book, that's so far ahead. So when Gwen married George, you know, it's sort of 40 years before she can kind of seek.
Sort of government or societal support recognition
to reflect that back on her.
So, right. And we know that it's still happening today in the news. The coroner's court in Queensland was talking about Hannah Clark, the woman who was murdered and her 3 children by her ex-partner. And, you know, I've had a couple of people say to me that, I guess this sort of thing happened in the 60s and 70s, but not now. But, you know, I remember when that event happened, because it was just so horrific, and the neighbours were saying he was a good bloke. Yeah. Believe it. And so, you know, there are still these facades of the good bloke who behind closed doors is doing dreadful things, because I don't believe that was the first time he'd hurt Hannah and the children. I don't know, and I might be wrong, but I doubt it very much that was the very first time he had ever hurt her physically or psychologically or emotionally, and the children. So, you know, it still does, even with the laws in place, it still does happen. And there are, you know, we know there are still so many cases of women being killed by their ex-partner. Yeah. And there must be so many more again where women are just, you know, the coercive control, financial control, the psychological abuse, and then, you know, unfortunately also physical abuse. So, but Gwen was definitely trapped, and you're right, nobody ever did speak up, and, you know, in our situation nobody ever spoke up, and I kind of believe that people did know, but it was, you know, the Felicities have a conversation one day where the dad, who's really, really lovely and educated and all the rest of it, but he's an elder in the church, and there's this thing about, you know, men are head of the house and they control their family the way they see fit, and no one interferes. And that was definitely the case, well, with us, with Joy, with lots of other people, and it probably is. Like, even still today, people say, oh, I don't want to get involved. You know, maybe it's not as bad as it seems, or, you know, all that sort of stuff. So I think it's still an issue.
You know, it's interesting, the Felicities, because they really are the antithesis of the Hendersons. And it's interesting to know that they are, you know, that they were created as part of a plot point for this. But I really thought that they were the characters of the book that were resourced. You know, they had the resources, they probably had the position, the connections, or whatever, to have made some sort of impact or difference. And that was deeply frustrating when that didn't happen, and heartbreaking to Joy, because as you're reading those, you know, that chapter where she feels like, you know, she's just, it was so huge for her to divulge that to Felicity. This is what's happening. This is my reality. And she felt like you could just, it was coming off the page. She's like, oh God, all her hope is, please make this stop. And it didn't happen. Like, that's heartbreaking. That is so heartbreaking.
Yeah, I know. And, you know, I hummed and hawed about whether Mr. Felicity would say anything to George or not. But in the end, I think I had to come down, or I did make the decision that he wouldn't, because you know, that would be another whole sort of plot development. It would be a different novel, because George would have had to have changed his behaviour, or you know, something, you know, I guess there are other ways that could have unfolded. Yeah. I felt in the end that I had to be true to the times and the community values and church values and so on. Yeah. And that at some point I had decided how it was going to end. So it kind of all had to, you know, come to this point, which meant, you know, in a sense it's a tragedy. So one of my other writer friends has said it's like a modern day Greek tragedy, because you know, everyone dies.
Yeah. And it's the only way, it's the only way that any of them get any kind of reprieve or anything.
And I think once I'd sort of worked it out. So sometimes you write things and then you work out why you've written them, not the other way around. I kind of thought, oh, okay, and with the burning of the farm and all of them gone, that's the end of it. There's no inherited violence anymore. That's it. It's done. It's dusted. And, you know, crime, sort of the cosy crime stories, the Agatha Christie's, and you've probably read the Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, and all those sort of lovely murder mysteries. Part of the sort of device and setup and so on that they use is that you start off in the little country English village. There's a murder, so normality is disrupted, and then you go through the whole process of working out who did what, when, why, and etc. And then normality is restored again. And I guess in a sense, even though it's not a cosy murder mystery, but I guess there was that too. That okay, the community can now move on. George and everything that he did has gone, and so normality, whatever that might mean, has been restored.
And it was incredibly arresting, like the whole thing, like going back to before when we were talking about with George, and that it was about how he was perceived and everything. His family unit was a reflection of him and how God would see him and his standing in the community, and then that's what was completely taken from him in the end, like no one turned up to his funeral, and that was so satisfying. That was so satisfying. Yeah. Oh my gosh, what revenge. And it was really interesting too. God, the moral gumption in Joy, because when he was there incredibly vulnerable, I would have killed him. I don't know, or maybe not. I don't know. I've not been in that position, but it was incredible. As the reader, I wanted her to just kill him. And
I've got a question for you then, Billie-Jo, and everybody else. How did George die? How do you think George died?
Too peacefully was just said, far too peacefully. Well, all right. How do you think George died? What's the consensus here? Did he overdose himself? He overdosed. So the consensus is that he overdosed. Oh, but Joy actually overdosed him.
He's a coward. He wouldn't overdose.
Oh, someone's just said he was a coward. He would not have overdosed.
Oh, but
Yep.
suicide, you go straight to hell.
Suicide, you go straight to hell. He didn't want to go there. So he, yeah, good point. Yes.
Was he able to know that was what the tablets were doing to him?
Oh, was he cognizant enough to know what the tablets were doing or not doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that, so I'm going to say I don't know. Probably not. So I'm going to read you the first line of the book.
Yes, please. Oh, yes, it's fabulous, this first line. Yeah, we'll talk about that more in a sec. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. The moment he dies, the room explodes with light. So what does that tell you about Joy?
She was there when he died. Yeah.
And what does Joy tell Shepherd when they talk about what happened?
Oh, God, remind me, quick. She wasn't there. She says she wasn't there.
Correct.
Oh, so she was. Yeah, okay, all right.
So she was there and she knows the moment he died.
Yeah.
So
she was watching. She watched him go, you think? Yeah. She was waiting. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. So Joy and I are quite similar. All right.
And I did, when I was writing, I was thinking, oh God, am I going to be saying, that this is what she wants to do? And, will she, at one point I hadn't decided whether she was going to kill him or not. And I talked to a friend of mine who had fairly similar childhood, and her father is still alive, and she's a bit older than me, and she said to me, if I could kill my father and get away with it, I would.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me because I thought, wow, and she's she's a teacher, she's a very highly educated woman, she thinks about things a lot, and she said to me, if I could kill my father and get away with it, that was the writer, obviously, she said I would.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I think I can go down the path that she would want to get revenge.
Yeah. Right, okay, because I really almost, admired that aspect. Well, I still admire Joy, but I really was admiring that aspect of her where she was just finding it to be enough that she was playing with him being in pain and agonised. But he wanted something, so she was like, I'm not going to give you what you want. I'm not going to be subservient anymore. But I'm glad she did kill him. Yeah.
And I'm going to say also the other thing was that there was Ruth.
Yes.
So Ruth and Joy are kind of, Joy.
Duality,
the two halves of Ruth. Yeah. And Ruth was the one who kept saying, we're going to kill him, we're going to get revenge, etc. And Joy was kind of, no, I'm not going to kill him. And Ruth at one point says, well, if you're not going to, I will.
I will, yeah.
So there was that, internal, and, as we know, sorry for anyone who's not read the book, but, there's Joy and Ruth.
Disclaimer, that's okay. We gave a disclaimer.
So this is the internal struggle that Joy went through.
Yeah.
And the only way she could deal with it kind of was to be in two, to have, which had been the case all her life, obviously.
Yeah. So is that a response to trauma to protect yourself and
Yeah. And interestingly, if you get around to reading Janine's book, she's done the same thing. And this is not, there are no spoilers in this, but what she has done, the whole book, is a conversation between herself and another part of herself.
Right, yeah.
As if they're two people and they go to places and they have conversations.
Yeah.
But it's all Janine, but she's split herself.
All of this.
Yeah, she split herself in two. It's really interesting.
So... Yes.
When did you realise that your normal was not normal?
Good question. when did you realise, what age would you have been when you realised that your normal was not a common normal?
Look, I'm going to say when I was about, probably about 13, I might have been a little bit younger. I'm going to say when I was about 11, because I was at high school when I was 11, and I was at high school, but I know I was very young. I went to someone else's home.
Yeah.
So it was nothing like the Felicities in terms of all of that, but they were also farmers, I don't know, a few miles down the road, and I was friends with both of their daughters, or both the daughters. One was a year older than me and one was a year younger.
Yeah.
And I think I stayed the night because I'm sure I had dinner there and we were sitting around afterwards watching TV, and I realised that everyone in the house was relaxed.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was a really weird thing. And, maybe before dinner everyone was sort of, doing all that before dinner stuff, cooking, and, the dad would have been out milking the cows and, I don't know, whatever, maybe we were just mucking around in the the bedroom or something like that. But I remember it was after dinner, I thought, oh my God, everyone here is relaxed. And they kind of just speak normally to one another. And that's when I started thinking, I don't think that this, sort of simmering fear that I have all of the time is normal.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
which you demonstrate that in the book too, because Joy experiences exactly that when being around with the Felicities, and she's a bit younger than you yourself were considering these sorts of things. But that came across so strongly, and it was heartbreaking to read, Yeah. Yeah. So there's so many interesting dualities like in this book.
Oh yeah.
I really love. Can I just read something? I don't know. I thought when there was a big aha moment for me in. Sorry. All right. So Shepherd, which is interesting because another thing about Shepherd after, but so Shepherd thought again of the jigsaw puzzle he and Ron had started before Wendy disappeared. With each piece having two sides, if you could ever actually finish the damn thing, there'd be two complete pictures, only one of which you could ever see, because the reverse picture was, of course, hidden from view. My gosh, where did you get the idea of the puzzle? Because there's so much of that in this book. There's the whole dichotomy of all of these different sorts of things. There's the the public persona, the at-home truth. There's there's the Joy and the Ruth dichotomy going on. There's the the antithesis between Felicities and Henderson. Yeah, I loved the puzzle piece. And now
such great questions. But so in the masterclass that I go to, there's a guy who runs them, novel writing masterclasses, and I was having a talk to him one day, a sort of one-on-one conversation with him, and we were talking about the book, and we were talking about the process of writing a novel, and I said, just kind of out of the blue, I said it's like a jigsaw puzzle, except you haven't got the picture at the end, and there are extra pieces, and you don't know whether you've actually got all of the pieces, and I have heard of jigsaw puzzles that have both sides have got a picture on, so you don't know which side goes where. And I have heard of jigsaw puzzles that have, like it's 1,000-piece jigsaw, but you get 1,100 pieces. So there are these, red herrings, I guess, in this.
Yeah.
And when I told him, when I said writing a novel is like trying to do one of these jigsaw puzzles where you don't have a picture, and you've got these double-sided pieces and you've got extra pieces. And he said, oh, my God, that is fantastic analogy. He said, can I use that in the writing classes? And I said, yeah, go for it. And then I thought, I wanted to put it in the novel. I thought, I think that's sort of really, I just wanted to put it there because that's how I felt writing a novel was. But I couldn't put it in terms of this is what writing a novel is like. So at one point, when I was writing about Shepherd and Ron, I thought, it's the same for them too when they're trying to solve a crime. They have some pieces that they need, but some pieces that they don't, but they don't know which ones they need and which ones they don't. And I had this thing that, there are two sides to people, and some people are going to lie to you and some people are going to tell you the truth. So you never know which side of the piece to take and where to put it. So it just sort of seemed to fit naturally in there. So that's where it came from. And, I like it, but I'll never do one of those jigsaw puzzles.
Yeah. So the Hendersons, it's really, to have observed this family dynamic. They're both unified and then distanced by the fear and violence. They're like the act of violence kind of unifies them. They all share that weight of responsibility of keeping up appearances. In time, the heartbreaking thing is it's living in constant survival mode and being around, that fear and anxiety that prevented them from actually sharing like real connection and moments of intimacy, because they just couldn't. They had to toe the line, and they were always anxious and.
And I look, I got that, pretty much straight out of my own, that's how it was for us. So I have two brothers, and we've talked about this, of course, and so we get on well, the three of us, but we are not close. Because we were not close when we were children, because we were all surviving. And it so I think that there's I'm going to say kind of a myth again around how families do unite and look after one another. And one of my friends was telling me that a writer friend was telling me about how she has two brothers, both older than her, and how they always looked after her in all sorts of situations from when she was, as young as she can remember, right through until kind of she got married or whatever. And I said, my brothers weren't like that. And I had written a scene, that's right, I had written a scene where Mark had, I don't think it got to the end into the novel, where Mark had done something to kind of either betray Joy or not protect her or something like that. And my friend said, but he wouldn't do that. He would protect her. And I said, no, but it doesn't work like that, because you just focused on protecting yourself. And it is survival mode, and you're always on eggshells and always second guessing. Am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I going to be in trouble? So they are united in that they kind of keep it a secret from everybody. Gwen certainly out of shame and a complete lack of choice. She had nowhere to go. And no one to go to, of course. And the children out of, that sort of naivety and shame, or, that sense that it must be my fault that children have, and all those things that we talked about before. So, they are kind of united and
distanced.
So I hadn't sort of really thought about that as the family, but it's an interesting thing. And one of my brothers said to me one day, when I think the three of us were talking about stuff, and he said, we could never tell anybody else this. This is when we were adults. And we sort of looked at him and said, because, well, they might or might not believe us, but he said, it's only the three of us who actually know what it was like, and we could never tell. We could never he was saying, we could never adequately tell someone else what it was like. So, I don't know, maybe that's when the seed planted. And I thought, maybe I can tell people.
What was the experience like to be writing such personal material? Were there moments, like, I'm curious as to whether this felt cathartic, or were there moments that you could almost be re-traumatized by rehashing so much stuff? Like that.
And so I could see how that could happen, but I'm going to say I don't know why, but I wasn't re-traumatized. It was definitely cathartic. And then, as I said, sort of moved into writing predominantly fiction or wrapping a whole lot of the truth, wrapping it up with fiction.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I was writing, maybe some of the darker, sort of more, difficult scenes, in a sense they were almost the easiest. I don't know whether I just sort of wanted to get them over and done with quickly, but I was always typing really quickly when I was writing those scenes, and it did seem to come very easily. So I don't know whether it just all sort of been sitting in there waiting for me to get it out and get it on paper. But it was relatively easy, but definitely cathartic. And I think perhaps not re-traumatising. I think because it is now so long ago, and in a sense, I kind of do feel that it happened to someone else.
Yeah.
I do feel that I'm not that little girl. I mean, clearly I'm not, physically and emotionally and a whole lot of other ways, but obviously I am the product or, the development of that little girl. But I feel like it's a long way away, and I can, I think talking about it has helped a lot. I actually admitting to other people that this happened, like I was saying before, you just leave it, you lock it up inside you and think, oh my God, I could never ever tell anybody that this is what happened. So yeah, definitely cathartic and weirdly, perhaps relatively easy to write.
Yes, yeah. There's it's suggested by Dr. Vicky when she's, kind of slipping medical files to Shep. There's a thread there talking about the fact that George had mental health issues and possibly a personality disorder.
Yeah.
Were those blue pills? Was his migraine pills? Was he on a prescription medication for something, or was that?
You know what? I'm going to say I don't know.
Yeah.
So, technically maybe I should know everything about the story since I wrote it. But at one point I definitely had it in my mind that he was on prescription medication for, depression or bipolar disorder or something like that, although those conditions weren't really well known of or even identified as labels like that back then.
Manic depression, is that I forget the term that you actually used in the book, but possibly it was manic depression or something.
Yeah. I guess depression would have been, but I don't. Yeah, because I know we used to talk about people who had nervous breakdowns.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what it was. And when I first started writing it, he did have migraines, and that they were migraine tablets. And then as the story developed a lot, I was sort of thinking, I think he had mental health issues.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit from the Defence Forces that was thrown out originally because he was, there were a few conditions listed there that were all, I guess, possible reasons why he'd been discharged in the first instance. And so I think I kind of did want him, him to be have depression or a mental health condition,
something underlying, because I found it really interesting that was mentioned and not necessarily explored after, because because there's no real correlation between the idea that the mental illness equated the violence. It's not that they're not to be
and I think in the end I decided I wasn't going to clearly say which it was, because Joy would never have known whether they were migraine tablets or whether they were for something else. And even when she came back as an adult, she would never have known.
Yeah.
And I definitely did when Vicky says to him, "All right, then I won't tell you that he was diagnosed." I think she says I won't tell you that he may or may not have been diagnosed with depression, and he may or may not have been on medication, because she's not supposed to reveal, other patients. Shep. I definitely did want Shepherd to say, it doesn't matter. Or he said something like, I know other people are depressed, but that, you know, there are a lot of people who are depressed, but they don't beat their children.
Yeah.
That I didn't want it to be an excuse.
Yes, that's right.
It would
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
you know, some way to being an explanation, but I did not want it to be an excuse for him
Yeah.
or for anybody else.
I did notice that, and I thought that was really delicately done. Yeah, I think it was really important for that to be noted as well. That, you know, yeah. Yes.
Is it implied that Joy inherited this mental health condition as well?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think I just heard a little bit, but
is there an implication that Joy inherited mental health issues?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. And or she was clearly damaged because of what had happened to her, and then because of what had happened to Wendy, of course.
Yeah.
Whether, you know, it's 100% inherited or, you know, nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
You know, maybe a little bit of both. But, yeah, and that was sort of part of the purging the world of the Hendersons.
Yeah.
It would stop. There would not be any more violence perpetrated by a Henderson. Good pick up.
I've just been let to know that we're approaching the hour, but there's one more thing that we really need to get into. Hour and a half. I'm really bad at this part of the job. Every time we do the book club, I go over time. Thank you so much for giving us so much extra time. But one thing that we have to clarify, can you please talk about the synesthesia and also the infinite library? And is the infinite library your idea of bliss as well? Because,
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that I wrote in an earlier version, you know, I have thousands of words that never made it to the printed version. In one scene, Ruth takes Joy to the infinite library because Ruth is in heaven.
Yes, yeah.
And she takes Joy to the infinite library, and Joy just thinks, oh, this is heaven, literally blissful. But what happens is that she goes there. I've forgotten his first name. Dewey is is in charge of the infinite catalogue of the library.
Decimal system. Nice.
And but it doesn't actually work out to be really good because Joy says to Dewey, I can't remember his first name. Anyway, says to Dewey, where do I go to find the fiction books? And he says, they're just past the non-fiction books. And you just have to go through that door there. So she goes through this door and there's a corridor and there are doors, identical doors down either side of the corridor. And she goes to one of the doors and it has a label on it that says it's 000.01 in the Dewey Decimal System. And she thinks, no, I have to go past that. So she goes down the corridor, but every single door has 000.01 on it. And so she opens one of the doors and she sees another corridor and there are just identical doors down there. And this just goes on and on and on because it's an infinite library. Every point in the Dewey Decimal System, there's an infinite number of books.
Yes.
So she can never get past the first point, and she never makes it to the fiction section because it's infinite. You can never get there. But we tossed around a lot about including that because everybody, like my agent and my publisher, they all loved the concept of the infinite library, but we just sort of couldn't work out how we were going to do it without revealing that Ruth was not real in terms of where it all sort of fitted in. And it just, so in the end we left it, but we all loved the concept of the infinite library. And the synesthesia was something that I put in because I really do love words, and I wanted Joy to love words, and I wanted her to have a really special relationship with them. And just popped into my head one day, So my daughter has the sort of common garden variety of synesthesia where she, for every letter and every number, has a colour in her head, and she's been like that since she was tiny. And so I can't say recent. I've just read a bit about synesthesia and I know a little bit about it, not a whole lot. Anyway, and I did hear of someone who has kind of slightly different but very similar version that Joy has, and I just thought, oh, this would be terrific, just something beautiful for her to experience and to have a beautiful sensation with words. I'm just going to show you something. So I have a friend who really loved my book, and she has created a dictionary.
Oh, wow.
And she's gone through the book and found every word that has a definition.
Yeah.
And she got her neighbour's daughter, who's 12 years old, so the same age as Joy is in the novel as a child, to illustrate all of them. So some of them are, so every single one is there. And
Publish that and we'll all buy one. That's beautiful.
And then remember when Joy, I forget what it is that her father does that makes her angry, and she changes my beautiful dictionary, whatever it was, to a cynic dictionary, and she has all of these really dark words. And my friend didn't want to give those words to the little girl next door, so she's got this thing here with all the really dark. I know, it's just amazing. And for every word that's in there, she's got, so this is nostalgia, pale dusty blue bubbles, and it says what page in the book it's on, and the little girls.
That's wonderful.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of very wonderful comments about the synesthesia and the definitions and the joy that it gave Joy beyond the bleak and the awful and so on, that she derived such pleasure from words.
She found herself in that, didn't she? She was the felicities give her that, and she starts to feel herself and find herself in her dictionary.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I like, because I know you'd asked me, but it's totally fine that we don't have time, but you'd asked me to read a bit, and perhaps one of my favourite bits, and I was going to read the bit where Mrs. Felicity gives her the note to write everything down, and then and then at the end, Joy looked at the book in her hands, worried that she would leave dirty marks on such a beautiful thing. Then Mrs. Felicity's told her to write down all the words and definitions, and Joy says to her, "And then what?" And then what? Mrs. Felicity's voice was loud and excited. "Then you will be a different person, Joy, and who knows what will happen after that." I like the idea that there was a possibility that something wonderful would happen to Joy.
Hope, Lyn, thank you so much. I think we really easily could have talked to you for 4 hours. Thank you. This book, it was such an experience to have read. It was wonderful to be able to unpack this work with you and discuss it with you. Thank you for giving us your time, because you are 2 hours ahead, aren't you? So
that's fine. It's a pleasure. And I said to you, I'm so impressed with the level of questions and the depth of your reading and understanding, and even the few questions that those of you who are there have asked. It's really very moving for me, and Penguin has, because of your book club, have printed book plates for me to sign to send to you.
Nice. Yes, please. Oh, that's great.
And we were hoping that they would get there. Well, they would get to me. I would sign them, send them to Paperbark, and you could give everybody one to put inside their cover. But they did send them, and they're lost in the Australia Post ether. So
when we find them, we will share them out. Oh, so
Billy, I just
Yes, yes.
I wanted to thank you for letting the Armstrongs say sorry through the memorial notice. I love those memorial notices.
Yeah.
So another jigsaw puzzle there with Shep looking in them for the
Yeah.
answer, and there was the message to Joy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, you're right. Were you able to hear that, Lyn?
Yes, I could,
Yeah.
yes. The Felicities wrote their death notice and said sorry to Joy, yeah.
Yeah.
I did feel there had to be something like that,
Yeah.
that they had to be.
Goosebumps. Yeah, that was, yeah.
Yeah.
Goosebumps
That's
on my
so good.
face too. Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight, and thank you so much for giving us your time, Lyn. We wish you... Yes, that's right. We're going to book you for your next book. That's for
That's
sure.
right.
Yeah.
I'm going to come in person. I don't care.
Yes. Right. Thank you so much, Lyn. This has been fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm really, really touched by all those really thoughtful, and deep comments and questions. And I don't think I'll ever kind of get used to the fact that people have enjoyed it so much. And it's very moving. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for letting us in. Thank you for sharing your story.
Pleasure. Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming along and contributing. It's really means a lot. It really does. It's great. Thank you.
Well, best of luck with your next book, and we will be in touch. You've not heard the last of the Paperbark Book Club. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our next month's book is